This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Dr. Janet McMordie. And you're a doctor, you're an actor, and a podcast host.
That's
So,
right.
welcome to the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So, we want to let people know we do have your URL below www.janetmcmordie.com. That will be fully clickable. And we do also encourage people that if you check out what's scrolling below, is we are a featured podcast on a Newsly platform. And if you use coupon code GHOST, you can check that out for free for 30 days. If you've never checked out that platform, that's an audio only platform we're featured. But I want to thank you again for being on the show. And we ask any guest on the show, we ask a couple questions before we really get into your story. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry, I'm in rural Canada. Sometimes the internet goes bizarre.
Okay. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Awesome. Oh, I love that question. I think the number one thing that motivates me is serving other people. I think, you talk to anybody who's gone into medicine and people always ask, why do you want to be a doctor? I'm like, I want to help people. Mm-hmm. And then everyone kind of eye rolls. I'm like, no, that's genuinely why. The service of others is, I get so much joy out of that. I think that's what motivates me in my medical practice. And to be honest, and I didn't clock this early in my career as an actor, the service of others, like performing for others and having people feel joy when they see a performance of mine, is what motivates me as well, right? It's in service of others. It's really cool. That's why I do what I do. Maybe that's a words of affirmation love language speaking, but it's great.
Yeah. Well, it's that kind of like a creative spirit. Like if you're a creative person, like you can generate that kind of joy, like service or performance. It's still like all service. I mean, if you go and you're a doctor, that's very specific service. But an actor can heal people too, and a musicians have been known to heal people through like mass healing, and so there's like you can do it at an individual level, a microcosm level, or a macrocosm level. So so like once you realize like, why you're here, what you want to do, that's always a thing. Like a lot of people don't really, they might have like dreams when they're a kid. And then they kind of get the dreams stomped out of them. And then they finally come back to their dreams. So in terms of your story, were you always dedicated towards service or being like in trying to help other people? Was that always your goal?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. And of course I want to say, yeah, totally. No, I don't think I was, to be honest. I don't think I was. I think there was, a self-servingness to wanting to become a doctor, wanting that scientific curiosity that never ended, wanting to be in school and enjoying school. And I think, it's only as I've gotten kind of older in this life. I mean, we're supposed to become more empathetic human beings as we get older, right? You're supposed to become a better person. It's, witnessing the impact that what I can supposed to, exactly, right? Witnessing the impact that we can have on other people, but also the impact that other people have had on me has made me realize how much I value being of service to others, but also I value people. Well, it sounds kind of pretentious, but like serving me, like the community aspect of everybody helping each other out. It's only, since I've gotten older and to be honest, gotten more creative and listened to that side of myself a little bit more that I've really experienced the benefits of that. Yeah.
So in acting, do you do like live acting or recorded? Like, do you do plays? Do you do like with an audience? Do you do film? Because the one thing as a musician, the one thing that I love as a musician is how you can feed off the crowd. It's like it's two-way street. Like as a musician, a lot of what I do, I'm into like jazz and fusion, experimental, and so it's kind of like in the moment, in stream of consciousness. You're feeding off that room, the crowd, the band, and that performance is kind of point in time, like a painter with a stroke. It's like that moment is probably not going to be repeated. And that's what's cool about it. I'm into the
Mhm.
fact that I like creating these kind of you can't recreate that moment exactly. You could try to get close to it, but you're probably never going to do it exactly. You can do something else. And I
Yeah,
was
and I
wondering, as an actor, what you think about like live audience and performing like that.
oh, and that's so interesting you say that, right? Like, I think so I do both. I've done a lot of theater, I've done some film and TV, and it's so interesting because yeah, absolutely you play off your audience. And when the audience is there with you, it's such an intimate thing, right? To be breathing the same air as a performer, like giving their all, musician, actor, anything is so it's such an intimate, special environment. You have similar things on a film set, but there's a weird dynamic, and I think you hit it nail on the head of knowing that what you're filming has permanence to it. Like it's going to be part of like the world forever. You know, it's going to be on a streaming service
Mhm.
forever. It's going to be part of like the library of forever. What you make and film is permanent, where what you do in theater there's an impermanence to it, and that's what makes it really special. I think it's those things make it either of those special, both of them special in their own
Yeah,
way. Yeah,
both of
you're
them
right.
are
There's
like
a special
special in a
sparkle. Yeah, there's a special sparkle of I was there when, and it's
yeah,
never going to happen again. And they were there with me. And anything can happen, and you can't just say, okay, take two. Right? No, you just got to
yeah.
keep going.
Well, it's like that thing is like there's this thing in a mantra in like fusion jazz that Miles and Herbie Hancock got into is like there's no bad note, there's only an opportunity. So when you
Ooh.
if you actually hit the bad note, which Herbie Hancock was kind of known in the interview, he pointed out, I hit this wrong chord. And Miles played it off and made it sound brilliant. And I thought it was like the worst moment in the world. And I kind of learned to let go. He like Herbie said, I learned to let
Mm.
go of trying to be perfect. I learned to say,
Oh,
there's no bad note. There's just another opportunity to evolve the piece of music. And it's a different mindset than if you were
yes.
classic when you're trying to hit Chopin, or you're trying to hit Beethoven, you're trying to hit it exactly versus, oh, I have freedom to hit it however I want to hit it at the moment.
Yeah. I'm seeing there's so many parallels to my improv career, like, to jazz, right? Like what you're saying, where with improv, you're with a team of people who and before every show, my improv group and I, we tap each other on the back and say, "I've got your back." Right? You know, if you give out something in improv and you kinda go, "Oh, shoot, that wasn't a good idea," the yes and approach to improv is your buddies around you on stage have your back and will keep it going as opposed to just shutting you down.
Be going,
Like,
yeah.
no, we'll keep it going. Same with that story, right? Like you have people there with you who are
Yeah,
like,
you don't have to
"Yep,
start and stop.
let's
Yeah,
go."
you don't have to
Yeah.
start and stop the whole thing. You can like feed off of it. And it's a
Yeah.
different mindset versus the kind of, the perfection mindset. Like where you get the
Yes.
perfection mindset, you got to keep on hitting it, you do it with 100 takes.
Mhm.
When really the first 4 takes are really what the song is. But
Oh, yeah.
because you can get really crazy about trying to be perfect, you can actually take all the life out of a song. I think you can take the life out of a performance if the director keeps on making you hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it. It's like, well, probably the first 4 times is probably the best thing. And like, maybe you're
Mm.
gonna hit it better, but probably not.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the struggle that I've been dealing with when I've been trying to do a bit more improv and things that require me to not be so perfectionistic because my other career in medicine, like I hate to say it, you have to hit the
Yeah,
notes, right? You have to be perfect because
you have to hit
you
it.
know people are there, like in my surgical career, I can't just be like,
And
I'm just gonna improvise here. But I think
yeah,
it's been really exciting
yeah,
to
there's a
to
there's a right
explore
and
that.
there's a wrong way.
Yes, very much so. There's an algorithm, but it has been interesting to explore how I can bring in a little bit more of that improv creative side to my medical career, obviously safely, but like being a better doctor because I have this improv and
Yeah,
acting
where you
background
can.
has been cool.
Well, also like with patient communication versus patient
Mhm.
procedure operation, like you probably have a limited range in the operation procedure, but in terms of your communication style,
Yes.
there's a lot of opportunity if you're creative
Yeah.
to learn how to do better, right? Or
Oh
learn
yeah.
how to read things, read the room.
Yes.
and not just go on you because it's kind of left right brain. Like in some
Totally.
situations, it's good to have that logical, perfect, scientific mindset. In other
Yes.
situations, you need a more humanistic kind of sociological approach or psychological approach versus it's black and white and that's it.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah.
cut it usually with human beings.
Oh, I become a way I know I'm a way better doctor because of my acting and my improv because it immediately it connects people to my humanity, right? When they kind of I have patients who come in, they're like, "Oh, I googled you and I saw your website and you're an actor as well." I'm like, "Yeah." Oh, like there's an immediate kind of, "Oh, you're more than this career that you are." And it makes you more human, I think. Ooh, I can't hear you. No. Oh, that was weird.
Do you hear me?
Ooh, there we go.
Am I back?
You're back.
Here we go. Sorry, there was some kind of
That's
there's
okay.
some kind of net glitch like I just ran into.
It's the
But yeah,
internet.
it's just
There's
like I think
always a glitch.
what we were talking
It's
about.
just
Yeah, yeah, the glitchy net. But
yeah.
it just seems like the kind of left right brain thing because I in my world I'm a software engineer in my day job, and there's certain parameters. Is like it's either yes or no. Computers just know with all this AI, computers still just know yes and no. They know on and
Hmm,
off. And we've
hmm,
gotten very sophisticated with the levels of on and off to the point where it seems like it's a human, but still no. It really just knows yes and no. That's it. And so like we have very limited capabilities that we try to build up and act like they're more than what they really are. But
yeah.
um I just think that a lot of times I like the creative side because I have more room than just yes or no. I got the grays.
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
all the color. And I think that you
Exactly.
find in your life because you have that science kind of based thing, and then you have this thing where it's like, no, there isn't a right answer. This I have some freedom here. Is that what you were looking for, or you
Mm.
found that you needed that?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think, what my creativity constantly reminded me of is that medicine is a practice, and we actually call it that, right? My medical practice. We're just practicing medicine. There is sometimes
Mm,
a right or wrong answer in medicine, but we do such a disservice to our patients by not being creative in our diagnostic capabilities, right? And not thinking a little bit outside of the box and thinking about other options and saying, no,
yes,
this
sir.
is the way it is because it's what it has been for eons. Like, no, we're just practicing here because we're constantly learning. And so that curiosity that has now come with creativity, and I mean, curiosity is like the baseline of every scientist, right? Every scientist needs to be
Right.
so
Yes.
curious. You know, if things don't work the way you want them to, you can't just yell and scream and flip a table. You have to go, oh, interesting. I wonder why. Let's figure it out. Where I always wanted that,
Yeah.
but I was kind of stubbornly fighting against it. But what brought that curiosity back was my
Mm,
creative part of my brain was reigniting that and saying, don't forget
that's
about
cool.
me. I'm here and I'm helpful too.
That's interesting because the canon of like science in some ways is like if you're a theoretical scientist in your research, you're supposed to be challenging your theorem. You're supposed to
Mm,
challenge these rules and laws and say, hey, maybe that law doesn't work anymore. Maybe that
yeah.
theory doesn't work anymore. Let's try to disprove it. But then sometimes you get into a canon and then it's all about the canon. And it's all about preservation of the canon rather than, well, aren't you supposed to be like forward thinking? Well, what's going on? It's like, why is there that dichotomy? Because you're supposed to have all this scientific method. Well, so then you're supposed to challenge things, are you? But then it's like, why aren't
Yes.
you challenged?
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard because our human nature is we don't like when there's challenge, right? We don't like when people or things or theorems go against what we have thought for so long, right? That's hard. That's vulnerable. That's admitting that you might be wrong. It's admitting that science might
Mhm.
be wrong. It's admitting that there needs to be more work. But what the cool thing I think is about if you can be that bit more creative is to kind of overcome that fear of, oh, people are going to think I'm stupid because I'm
Yep.
wrong. Like, no, people are going to be like, cool, you're
Yeah.
exploring further. Like, awesome. What else can we discover? Again, it's
Yeah.
that curiosity piece. It's becoming a better person
You're a
as we
pioneer.
get
I mean, the
older.
whole idea of the pioneer is
Yeah.
like you're going, you might be going into shaky ground. It's like the whole idea, like anytime like I was into, I'm into all these like musical icons. You think about like a guy like Lou Reed, Bob Dylan,
Ugh.
Jimi Hendrix, Frank Zappa. They push things. They push things on the edge, right? And then people would say like Hendrix showed up in the recording studio, and initially his recording engineers would not record the feedback. They said they were taught
Huh.
not to record that because it's bad noise, right? And he forced it. He forced like he used to sometimes even have to sit on the board and force it in, right? So he believed in it so much. And then that how many people have that kind of pioneering spirit that
Mm.
the engineer, the producers say, "Well, that's bad sound. We don't put that on record. We don't do that." And then you actually say, "No, you're gonna do
Yeah.
it."
Yeah.
That's not what they're on. Like, and it's just an analogy to cutting edge issue you have to have when you're kind of treading into a new territory. Most people will say they hate it
Yeah.
because they never heard it before, or they never
Yes.
seen it before, and they never looked at it that way before. And that's what I love about creativity when you're able to be more exploratory or expansive. Yeah, you're gonna have some people that don't like it, but that's the point.
Yeah.
Because there's law
Yes.
of attraction. People who will like it will come to you, and
Yeah.
then you'll get the feedback you need. And you get feedback is good, even if you hated it. It's good feedback.
Well, and I think it's opinion making, right? And I think the thing I struggle with now is that, society has gotten so divisive that we just don't listen to people's opinions and we don't kind of go, "Oh, interesting. Let me take that in. Let me think about that." Still not really what I think, but it's like I don't know, there needs to be a malleability a little bit, right? There needs to be a feeling of, okay, the record producer is saying, "Nah,
Yeah,
I don't like that." And I can say, "No, I believe in it, but let me also listen to this feedback and take that in and work it." I think again that's scary as well too, to
yeah.
admit that maybe I don't know everything. I'm going to accept an opinion from someone else, some feedback from someone else, and see how I feel about it. I think it's tough. It's vulnerable. I'm definitely not perfect at it, but man, am I better than when I was.
I think it's kind of like whatever serves the moment of what creativity, right? There's some
Mm,
situations where, as an artist, you have a clear vision. You know
yeah,
exactly what you want to do. Now you can take the feedback, but it's like in this particular whatever serves this piece needs something that's not traditional, right? And I think
mhm.
that's where like sometimes they're like, yeah, it's not like every moment you got to win, but there are certain moments that are important to you as a creative person that you're gonna
Yes.
realize that this is my vulnerability, this is what I can do, and this needs to kind of be out there. And
Mm,
I'll listen to people and I'll take it in, but like for this particular moment, this piece, this has to go this way, and I'll listen like where other things, but even in that moment, you know, I hear it, but I'm gonna go that way because that's what I feel.
yeah, absolutely. And thank goodness, like you were saying, thank goodness so many people in our history have done that. And, because I don't even want to know what would have happened if people just became so passive. It's a little scary.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of problems with our structure today with, like, if you think about the social media, right? The
Mhm.
social media, like, you do a cat video gets 1,000,000 views versus somebody puts out, like, an original poem gets 100 views, right?
Mhm.
Somebody reads a spoken word poem they wrote themselves, it gets 100 views. they immediately think the value of that poem has less value than the million views on the cat video. But what they fail to
Yeah.
realize is, what if somebody in that 100 views ends up giving you a chance to speak at a poetry slam, or
Mhm.
because they saw it, you get an opportunity. The number doesn't represent everything about that opportunity. We've been gotten so
Yeah.
into these metrics that
I
we
know.
fail to recognize opportunities unless they hit certain values. And I think that's
Yeah.
where a lot of the young people can be deterred in
Yeah.
becoming, you know, artists if they don't
Mm.
immediately get instant feedback, instant numbers, instant
Yeah.
likes. And it's detrimental to me to forward progress if that's how you're going to measure everything.
Mm. I think also what's interesting about social media is the how much we forget that if 100 people liked your spoken word poem, imagine if that was 100 people who showed up to watch you say your spoken word poem in a theater. You'd be thrilled. Like when I first started my podcast, I would get so discouraged because there weren't that many people listening. But then I would kind of extrapolate and say, wait a second, if I took all of
Mhm.
those at the beginning, like 50 listeners, and plunk them in a theater and they were sitting there listening to me, I'd be like, oh my God, 50 people are listening to me. This is amazing. But there's a weird
Yeah, it's
dilution.
perspective.
We don't value the social media as
Yeah.
much. It's like if 100 people listen to me do my poem, I'd be like, if there were 100 people standing in front of me listening, I'd be like, what? This is incredible. But we don't value the social media stuff as much.
You're back. Can you hear me?
Yep.
You hear me?
Yes.
Who's it again?
Oh, you can't hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you for a second. I got that drop. I don't know.
Weird.
Here.
Ugh.
So, yeah, but so I missed a little bit of that. But yeah, it's just frustrating when I deal with people because I think vulnerability and that's the core. But a lot of people just
Mm,
want to be liked. They want to
mm,
kind of go along to get along, and there's a lot of like I don't know, the trap of comparison, the comparison trap. So like I run into a musician and they're like, I want to sound like what's in the top 20. And I would say, I want to hear the song that you're scared to show anybody as a producer, because to me
uh,
that's going to be more interesting. Because I think your secret sauce is you. It's not the fact that you could sound like Taylor Swift, or you could sound like Jay-Z, or you could sound like whatever. Yeah, because guess what? There's already a Jay-Z. There's already a
yeah.
Taylor Swift. Your secret sauce is how you approach music and
Mm,
what you have. And so your demo that doesn't sound like them, to me, is more interesting than you trying to
mm.
sound like them. And then we got
Oh,
a world where a lot of people just want to clone what is already successful, to the point we get people just remaking movies
mhm.
that we've seen already 4 times. And it's the fourth remake of something that was already done. And probably the first time it was done the right way or the best way.
Mhm.
But it's like, you don't think you should come up with a new idea? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so I wonder about that. But
Yeah, well, I think so much of it is risk, right? Which is another word for vulnerability, like you said. It's hard for people to take a risk on an unknown. And when they know that something that's being remade, they know that this is a sure thing. I always think about, because I'm in Canada and we film Hallmark Christmas movies here, tons of them. And they have the same structure and they never veer from the structure because they know it works. Anytime they kind of try and subtly
like a
take a
soap
risk,
opera.
well, yeah, and I think they know what works. So they just like,
Yeah.
why would we change it up when we already have a successful formula? Again, the scientist, right?
Yeah,
Who's kind of like,
formula.
I
Yeah.
don't know, why would we change this? Why would I put risk in? Because that's scary, that's vulnerable, that's expensive, and it could lead to a disaster when I could be not a pioneer and just trundle along and people will be like, yep, they did the thing again. Where there's such a vulnerability to saying, like you were exactly what you were saying before, to being a pioneer. But if it's successful, and even if it's not successful, I think that's legacy building, right? Which I think is at the core of what we want to do as humans on this dumpster fire of a planet.
Yeah, I mean, we want to be able to, stamp our, our mark. And to me, it's like you get so many people, like, if you think about, I'm a musician. I play keyboards. I play synths. I actually physically play.
Cool.
But a lot of musicians today, all they do is like they clone, sample, cut, and paste stuff that's been done before.
Mm-hmm.
They take a lot of things. Not that you can't do that, and there's a lot of successful producers. That's what they do. They record on a grid on a computer. They don't record at the keys. They don't record at the instrument. I kind of much out of the '70s where you grew up recording into a multi-track with your bass guitar, with your drummer, with people actually playing. And there was something about actually playing the song that built the song. It was like the mistakes. It was like what we call happy accidents. The happy accidents make the song. If you're on that grid, what makes the song is, you need to be in the BPM. You need to be in the key. The tool starts telling you when you're making mistakes. So you start making sounds, things that sound very perfect, but they have no life. They have no heart. They don't have a lot of soul, because a lot of the soul comes from the perceived mistake. The tone pitch that's a little off.
Yeah.
It's a little shaky. Like the timing change is a little off. That makes the song. It's kind of like the human element is what makes the art, right? So you can have AI make art and it looks great, but what's a real human artist painting? There's something about their soul that got onto the canvas.
Yeah.
Like the computer doesn't have that soul.
No, and it's so funny.
It looks good. It might look good, but it doesn't have that.
Well, there's this comes right back to what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, right? Your story with Miles Davis, right? There's those like happy accidents that can happen in improvised, in jazz and stuff like that, and stuff that you only get one take in live theater, right? I think that's so interesting to hear the difference between actually physically playing it on the keyboard versus I'm playing it on the computer. That's so interesting. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it becomes a big equalizer because kids that don't have pianos, kids living in small apartments that can't make no noise. They were able to get into it. I understand it it gives you equal capability, but you lose some stuff too. And so this like for everything, and a lot of times these kids will figure out, it's like, I do need to bring live music in. I do. As they get bigger, they start to realize there's something about live musicians, and they get studio musicians to play with them because they start saying, that is important. And all I'm saying is you can't do, like, because we're living in a new age where people think, I heard some guy talk to me saying AI is going to replace all the studio musicians. I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And I would think in your field as an actor, I mean, they're saying, we can use AI for all the background actors, for all the people who are stand-ins or people like who are playing character actors. We don't need them. We can just grab some AI and throw them in. And have them like just have major roles and everything else be made all AI. And it's like, really, would directors and writers really think that that's the way to represent their work?
I think we see it in medicine as well too, right? Like, is AI going to replace all the doctors? And I think my biggest issue is human beings are programmed, for lack of a better word, to forgive other humans for the most part, right? We can forgive medical error a lot of the time, right? If something goes wrong, we're like, you're only human, right? Like, poor medical outcomes doesn't mean poor patient care. The problem is that I don't think a human being can forgive a robot, right? I think that's where we're going to get stuck, is if a robot messes up, And they will, and they have, because they can't see nuances in people's face. They only know yes, no, right? Yeah, sure, they're good at some things, but not others. They don't know body language or anything like that. A patient isn't going to forgive a robot, and then we're in trouble. And I think that's where I think the pendulum starts to swing backwards to, can we get the humans back, please? I'd rather deal with a human. I'd rather deal with a human tech support. I'd rather deal with a human lawyer. I'd rather deal with a human judge, a human doctor. And then it pushes into, I want a human musician. I want a human actor. This is ridiculous. I don't want the robot anymore.
Yeah, that's definitely I think the problem is what I've seen with like tech people, because I'm in tech, is sometimes we get ahead of the curve and like the technology can do things. And then the question is, just because it can, does it really mean you should do it? Right?
Exactly.
Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do that. And the problem with tech is like you go and invent, like, they watch Oppenheimer. Like he was so into the tech of building the bomb. Then once he did it, he started like, oh, should I really? I was so into trying to prove I could do it. And now I'm questioning whether I should have done it. Right? It's like a lot of these tech people, they create something and it gets out of hand because like it got beyond the morality, gets beyond the legal aspect. And well, a lot with AI is really there's a lot of privacy and there's a lot of copyright ownership issues because the machines learn on content. And then they tend to repeat that content and will say it's original, but it's actually a lot of it's copyrighted stuff or patented stuff. And so he's like, the machine doesn't know because you haven't put the rules on it. So the law is way not catching up to what the computer can do. And the morality isn't catching up to what the computer can do. And so we, like, as human beings, it's our job to rein in the machines and say, what is actually legitimately going to help human beings and what is actually not really in service to us, because these things are supposed to be in service to us, not to, control us.
And it's going to take time, right? Because right now it's shiny and new and fun. And people are like, whoa, look at what this thing can do. Just like anything that we've ever invented ever, right? Like automobiles, like dishwashers, like hairspray, right? We kind of start realizing,
before the speed limit.
Yeah. You kind of go, ooh, this is
didn't have
exciting.
Speed limits until we figured out that speed kills.
Exactly. Same with like
and then speed kills and like,
right?
oh, I guess you need a limit.
Shoot, maybe we need to restrict this. Yeah.
I didn't need
so
it.
I think it'll take some
maybe
time.
so it's definitely I think it's interesting, like when you start to cross like different disciplines, like we've been talking about the kind of crossing between left to right brain, science, art. And I think we're in the age where science and art are all conflating. There's a lot of that going on. If you look at it, there's a lot of things where people used to think, oh, you got to be a scientist, you have to be a mathematician, and now we're looking for linguists, we're looking for artists, we're looking for people who are philosophers to cross into, this era where it's multidisciplinary. Right. It's like you need to kind of have a holistic vision and not just be stuck in your lane.
Yeah. The medical school that I went to, so I went to McMaster University, which is in Hamilton, Canada, and they were kind of these renegades in the 70s. They were the first medical school in Canada that said, you don't need to have a science degree to apply. You can have whatever degree you want as long as you meet like the minimum requirements for the MCAT, the Medical College Admission Test. You can apply with anything because we need people who think outside of the box, right? Who think differently, who've been trained differently. One of my best friends in medical school has a PhD in film studies, and she's a pediatrician now and is a phenomenal pediatrician. I think you can teach anyone science. You can't teach people, the social skills. I guess you kind of can, but there's a different way to think.
Yeah, it's just like the Socratic method versus like if you're teaching a Socratic method or you're teaching critical thinking or holistic thinking, it's not like the person is like taking the SAT and they're just picking like yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, A, B,
Yes.
C, D. You
Yeah.
gotta do the blue book and you have to explain Sator or explain Camus or explain like why the founders set up the structure of our government the way it does and explain it in your own words, not just rattling off some date or
Yeah.
some incident or some law. You have to actually apply it. And I think that's where if you have that kind of mindset, if you went to a school where teaches you how to learn, you can learn
Mm.
anything.
Yep.
Or you could take a philosophy major and they could get into science. You could take somebody that was, an art major and they could still do something really unexpected. Like
Yeah.
a comedian can do a dramatic role. They could be
Yes.
one of the best dramatic actors ever. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
they're a stand-up comedian, but they can do drama because
Mhm.
you're that capable. If
Yeah.
people should not like underestimate their capability.
Well, and imagine if, like, I just imagine if these people were just told, you can only stay in this lane. You can only be a comedic actor. You can't do anything else. You could only be a, you know, physicist. You can't do anything else. Like, what a loss for the world, right? It just, we wouldn't have been able to get so much like greatness. Like, what a loss if they had never been told that. Yeah.
If you think about like the Da Vinci kind of mindset, like if you can
Mm,
be a Renaissance person, which means it's like art and science, it's like the softer things and the harder things, right? It's a left and right brain, but the yin
yeah.
and yang. It's like that is really the balance. I think we get into a world where people get so out of balance. They
Yeah.
think there's no need to learn philosophy. There's no need to learn art history. Only need to learn math. Only learn science. Only need to learn economics. Then you become devoid of some characteristics you need to be an active member of civil society. So you
Hmm.
need to be able to discern
Yeah.
things, and if you've been taught not to discern things, only live in a certain lane, then you can't have any out of the box, can't have any variation, and then variation to you is bad. And so instead of learning
Mm.
about the other or learning about something different, you just immediately hate it. You just hate it. It's like, why? Because you've been taught to kinda
Yeah.
not respect it, not understand it, not try to dive into it, just reject it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I think, again, it comes down to that curiosity piece, and I get worried about the whole adage of you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Like, oh, as I get older, am I gonna wanna learn less and less? Because right now, all I wanna do is learn things. I love school. I wanna take all the
Yeah.
classes. I wanna read all the books. I'm like, I get nervous about, am I gonna become that stereotypical aged person who's like, "No, I'm set in my ways. I don't wanna learn anymore." And that's, I think about some of the mentors I've had in my medical career, especially, who never became that person, who were constantly willing to listen to younger people, like listen to the generations below as
Mhm.
opposed to just like write them off as being like, ugh, they know nothing. No, no, no. Like
Yeah.
some of my mentors
Yeah.
really were, that's how they thrived, was having learners constantly in their presence teaching them, which I'm like, oh, I want to be just like that.
Well, I think the part of the cool thing about today is like you can gain capabilities through like traditional ways. I know a lot of people in tech that didn't necessarily have degrees from colleges, but they went and they were like they were hackers. They just liked it, right? They just
Yes.
figured it out on their own. They kind of just got into it
Yeah.
and they got really good and
Yes.
they were self-taught and they've been some of the best guys I've ever worked with. It's like they don't because they're thinking out of the box because nobody
Yeah.
told them how to think. They just found out for themselves. They kind of
Mm.
you find that people like sometimes in prison they self-taught. They read a lot
Yeah.
of books. They come out
Yeah.
and they can be brilliant, and you're like, wow. Is it like
Mm.
you don't necessarily have to have the traditional
Mhm.
structure to want to gain knowledge it doesn't matter. You could be 80 and have that mindset. You could be 20 and you don't have that mindset. So
Yeah.
you could be 20 years old and have the kind of perspective that you would think grandpa has, and you got it. And you're 20 and you're like, you don't want to go anywhere outside of where you're comfortable. So it's like, it's not controlled by your age. It's kind of controlled by like your inner vision.
Yeah. Well, I think about like my sister is in tech and has no formal education, and because she did exactly that. But I think for so long we as a society said, no, you have to follow this traditional path. If you have to go to university, and if your brain doesn't work in that way, and then like sit down at a desk and study, then sorry, I guess you can't do the job. Where I think now we've, thank goodness, swung a bit more in the direction of, okay, there's other ways to learn. People's brains are all different and unique. We need to, again, we've done such a disservice to people who are like neurodivergent and stuff like that, because we said, no, sorry, if you can't sit still in class for 20 years, you'll never be able to do the job that you've always dreamed of doing. I think now finally we're going, oh, interesting. Maybe everyone is different and we all learn differently.
Well, neurodivergence has been a big thing because there's a lot of people that, they don't learn in a traditional structure. And, there are a lot of industries that are starting to realize that, so-called disabilities are not necessarily disabilities. There's some capabilities that people have, autistic people, neurodivergent people have some amazing capabilities that we're kind of, they put them off and like, well, we can't use it because you don't fit in a box.
Yes.
Well, now, like, you can contribute and be part of the society. Like, we were like throwing so many people overboard that I don't think a society can afford to throw people overboard. I think they need to let as many people in.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Like, it's so funny you said that's so interesting. I was just having a conversation with somebody about almost exactly that, about how the argument against, unique learning styles was, we can't afford to teach kids in different ways. There's not enough public funding. There's not enough this. We can't afford it. Blah, blah, blah. You're like, sure, fair. But I think the flip is exactly that. We can't afford not to anymore. Because it's the loss to our society if these people.
You don't realize like your GDP will grow if you actually include more people and allow them to be efficient and effective and happy. Yeah. If you just throw people away, it actually will, and economists don't, certain types of economists don't want to hear that because they got a mindset. Then other economists actually look at it and say, the more inclusive you are, the more you're into like allowing these different learning styles, these different capabilities to actually be accepted or integrated into society, you get more innovation, you get more capabilities, you get more entrepreneurship, you get all the things you say you want that in your rigid structured society actually wasn't producing as much as you thought. So it's a kind of on its head because they have, people are in the canon and they want things to be the way they think it should be. And sometimes a lot of those things are kind of just contrived. But I just think being an artist, like when you have an art mindset or an artist or creative mindset, the kind of creative, that you're willing to look at things and be vulnerable. And take the ego out. Is you have to have ego to do it, but you take some of it out to be able to make those steps where you might be treading water. But well, you got to get on stage. The first time you're probably treading a little bit of water, but you're going to get better if you keep on doing it, like muscle memory, right?
Totally. I love that. That like got me all fired up. That makes me so happy that I think, in this, again, a dumpster fire of a world where you can just get really discouraged with what's going on. You're like, no, like there is a movement in that direction. And that's what's kind of keeping my fuel going and keeping me curious and keeping me interested, is the fact that there are people out there who are pushing for the pendulum to kind of swing in that direction, for others to to be involved in society. And then there's, again, just other people wanting to be creative and serve others, which is what makes an empathetic, wonderful society, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, I think it's just important to empathy is like a big thing you point out because there's so many people who think it's weak to have empathy.
Mm,
They think
mm,
like, oh well, you've got to have all these shame and judgmental, just like trying to like push people down there. And it's like, shame and guilt are like the enemies of any kind of like moving forward because like,
yeah.
shame and guilt keeps you stuck in the past.
Yeah.
Right, and then you can't if you're stuck in the past, then you're not moving ahead.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, anytime that I've felt shame or guilt, and we usually see, we talk about like anger being a secondary emotion, right? Like when people are angry, it's usually because they're feeling fear, shame, or guilt, right? They're and which are all kind of subsets of fear, right? They're feeling fear. And anytime I've kind of felt that and or expressed it, it has never ended well. And so I'm like,
Mhm.
why would I continue to do this? It has not ended well for me. It's not ended well for society around me. It's not ended well for the people around me. So why would I want that for myself or for others? Like, I need to make a change. And being empathetic, being sympathetic, if I've never experienced it, has resulted in a positive benefit for me, but also everyone around me. It's like, why would I not want my sole purpose in life to make myself feel good and everyone else around me feel good? If the opposite is happening, time to change.
Well, I think it's real important to kind of, have that, the kind of looking glass self-analysis. I always talk about the
Mm.
Victorians and the looking glass, but, to like in order to be, there for anybody else, you kinda gotta look at yourself, and it's like the whole idea, like looking in the mirror and and starting to have that because if you have a limiting belief or that you're gonna that's gonna be in part of your self, but it's gonna bleed into all your interactions. And you're probably
Mhm.
not gonna be feeling good, and you're not gonna have people around you probably aren't feeling good about it either.
Mm.
So once you start to build into yourself, and I was thinking as an actor, like you have to build up a certain level of confidence to actually perform. Did you ever
Yeah.
like have any kind of moments about like how did you get to that point as an actor? Like how did you
Mm.
or did you just feel like you had it? Or did you have to build
Yeah.
to it?
No. I definitely felt I had to build to it. I think it was practical building, taking acting classes, doing theater, failing at, fun improv games, feeling silly, therapy, building up those practical logistical ways to be an actor. But also I think, it's funny. I'm going to keep reflecting on that story that you're saying about Miles Davis, you know, recognizing that when I'm out there acting and something goes wrong, I have the tools to keep it going, to keep the scene
Mhm.
going, to correct it, to make it better, to not just freeze and run off the stage and leave everyone hanging or throw a temper tantrum because things aren't going my way. I have the tools and I've gotten those from life experience. I got into acting later on in life. And there's no way I could have been as successful as I am if I had started doing it when I was an idiotic 18-year-old who didn't have those tools, who probably would have just freaked out and run off the stage. So I think that's been a big part of it. It's been my life experience and recognizing that I have the tools to, when things go wrong, I know what to do.
That's the cool thing about it as you mature is like you get that kind of wisdom
Mm,
like it's like the muscle memory of your life experience. It's like
yeah.
all those moments are making it so if you don't are super self-critical, you can take all those things that happened, whether they were good or bad, and use them going forward. And it's actually informing, and you're grateful for it. Like a lot, I talk to a lot of artists, is like they're grateful for the mistakes because like the reason they're there now is because they made those mistakes, right? Because you can't make
Mm,
an omelet without breaking some eggs. It's like you're gonna you're gonna have all these things that aren't quite there, but you shouldn't
yes.
like be so down on yourself because they weren't there. It's like it's how you got to where you are.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, yeah, we can talk about like happy accidents, right? Or like pioneering, taking risks, trying something new. And if it, don't do the remake 4 times, do something original, do take a risk because otherwise, I don't know, you aren't fulfilled as an artist, at least personally. I wouldn't be fulfilled as a human if I
Mhm.
was just on muscle memory alone, or not so much muscle memory, like if I was just routinely going through the motions. That's not why I'm
Yeah,
here on this
phoning
earth,
it
right? Yeah, phoning it in, exactly. That's not fun
Yeah,
for me. I want to try new
yeah,
things. I want to experiment. I want to be a pioneer in whatever way that looks like. Maybe it's just pioneering for myself. That's cool too. Yeah. So I think it's exciting. And I think that's what's fun about the creative world that we live in. I think it's awesome. And we need the robots to not take over. They need to make my boring life easier so I have more time to create.
yeah. As long as they're a tool to allow me to spend more time being expressive, that's fine. But if they
Yep.
start getting into my expressive area and act like they can be as expressive as me, then I got a problem.
Yeah, they have to stay in their lane. The only things in this planet that need to stay in their lanes right now are the robots. Humans go
The robot,
explore all the lanes, but
they can go
robots need
there.
to stay in their lane.
Yeah, I don't want them in the creative zone. I think
No,
there's
you
some
need
people
to.
want them there.
Well, yeah, you need to tell me. I saw this funny meme online that was like, I want the robots to tell me when like I'm out of toilet paper. I don't want them to take over my job as a creative writer. Like, ugh,
Yeah, they don't need to take my role.
no,
They
yeah,
they don't need to do that. But this has been a really good podcast. I hate to cut it short. I do have another one coming up, but I
no, this
did
is
want to
awesome.
mention your website again, janetmcmordie.com. And like when people go there, do they find like links to everything about you? Maybe you can tell
Yeah,
people
they'll
what happens when they
see.
go.
Yeah, so you'll see, my some of my acting work, some of my voiceover work, but you'll also, I think most importantly, see my podcast that I do, which is called Second Act Actors, which is all I have conversations with people like myself who changed careers into acting later on in life. I also have conversations with people who are in the industry and who have supported us. So you'll see the podcast there as well too.
That's awesome. Well, I love
Thank
to
you.
talk to fellow podcasters, and it was great talking to you today.
It
And
was
sorry for
wonderful.
any of the sound problems we got through the net, but it's the net.
Oh,
But thank you.
never apologize for tech issues. It's not our fault, it's the robots.
Yeah. Okay, but thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you, you too.